Good evening. This is the October 23rd meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, Chair of the CAC. Our Vice Chair is Naj Daniels. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum and then read an announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bors absent. Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Ford present. Ford present. Member Kim
present.
present. Member Levine absent. Member Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales
present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ing
present.
present. Member Ortega
present.
present. Chair Siegel
Present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Also, public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you. That puts us on item 2, which is the chair's report. This is an information item. CAC members should have received the executive director's report, which was presented at yesterday's Transportation Authority board meeting. It is also available on the agency website at www.sfcta.org. Congratulations to Vice Chair Daniels and Member Ortega, who were reappointed by the board yesterday for another 2-year term on the CAC. On Monday, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, held the last of 5 select committee meetings where they voted on key elements of a regional transportation revenue measure framework to move forward to the MTC Commission for further review. Some of those key recommendations include there should be dedicated funding for transit transformation, which includes initiatives like regional wayfinding, signage, fare integration, and transit priority. All scenarios should include at least the 4 counties of Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, and San Mateo, which would help address financial deficits for the region's largest operators, including BART, Caltrain, Muni, and AC Transit. Sales, payroll, and parcel taxes should be explored and polled. And there should be language allowing for a citizen initiative, which would have a majority voter approval threshold versus a 2/3 voter threshold. The MTC Legislation Committee will consider these recommendations next month before going to a special full commission meeting on December 9th for action. Recommendations from the December meeting will be used to inform potential bill language to be introduced at the beginning of the 2025 legislative session. Helping Bay Area Transit pivot to a new financial model and new travel patterns post-pandemic is critical for San Francisco and the region. I hope staff can agendize a detailed update on this item for the CAC at our November or January meeting. Speaking of November, I'd like to remind folks that the CAC holds a combined November-December meeting each year to avoid conflicts with the holidays. That meeting will be on November 20th at 6 p.m. Meeting management notes. CAC members, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. We have a very long agenda tonight, so please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. And presenters, please try to be concise when responding to member questions. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
Checking for remote public comment. There is no public comment.
Great, thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 5 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. I'll just note that there are 2 action items on the consent agenda: approval of the minutes and adopting a motion of support to approve a professional services contract for the San Francisco Freeway Network Management Study. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Member Kim?
Yes, yeah, I have a question on the agenda 4, but do you think I can ask now or after presentation?
There will not be any presentation on the consent agenda unless you would like to request that staff speak about it.
Yeah, so this agenda for like 1,103,000 is from Prop L fund or other grant? That's my question. Like I read from the document in 2024, the board approved 1 million in Prop L fund for the SF Freeway Network Management Study. But this money we approving today is related to this 1 million or just separate? That's my question.
Is staff able to answer?
Hello, my name is Elisa Paz, the project manager for the Freeway Network Management Study. So the request that was brought a few months ago was for that about $1 million. And this is the same funds, but what we have done now is selected a consultant for technical professional services. And because that contract is a high dollar amount, we're bringing that to you all for approval. And what the action is to allow us to enter into negotiations with the selected vendor to have an agreement for work. So it's not new money,
It's the same,
it's
yeah,
the same money.
okay, thank you.
Member Milford Rosales?
So I was reading through the memo and was a little bit unclear and just wanted to confirm when mentioning that there will be no capacity increases in lanes on I-280. Does that mean no new lanes will be added to I-280?
Correct, and this is consistent with what we presented a couple months ago. So there will be no capacity additions, no new lanes. There are small pinch points in the network where we'll have to look at how to create continuous lanes, like through those pinch points, but we'll be very selective in how to do that through the design. But there won't be any like capacity expansion on the network.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members? Is there any public comment in the room?
Thank you, Edward Mason. Looking at the potential sources such as Intrex and Streetlight and Replica, it's interesting to see what they're capable of doing. So I would hope that the result of this study will indicate or be able to figure out where all the regional pass-through traffic that's going through San Francisco is coming from and going to. And also, it mentions in there about bus service. Well, I'll look at the Samtrans EPX bus that comes from East Palo Alto, Redwood City, and directly into San Francisco along the corridor in San Mateo County, the lane that they have. And it has been in operation now for probably 6 or 8 months or so. I periodically ride it, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And sad to say, the ridership on that bus is 2 or 3 people that go from Redwood City to the Transbay Terminal here. So I hope that we're able to, I hope that the consultants will be able to figure out how to increase transit ridership and also figure out where all this traffic is. I'm just amazed at how much traffic there is on the freeway in the morning. And I just wonder, where are they coming from and where are they going? So I look forward to reading this report once it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comments. And there is none.
Great, thank you so much. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Member Milford Rosales,
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
seconded by member Ortega. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve items 3 and 4 on the consent agenda, member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim.
Kim, I.
Kim, aye. Member Levine. Levine absent. Member Margarita. Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ing.
Ing, aye.
Ing, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 7 ayes. The motion is approved.
Thank you. That puts us on item 6 to adopt a motion of support for 2 professional services contracts related to the Uruguayna Island Multi-Use Path Project. And this is an action item. And we have Carl Holmes, Deputy Director for Capital Projects, to introduce this item, and Mike Tan, the Senior Engineer, who will present.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. Good evening, CAC members. Carl Holmes, Deputy Director for Capital Projects. I wanted to just give a little bit of context for the next 3 items that you will hear tonight to take an action on. Mike Tan will be presenting item 6, which is before you, and that is for awarding a contract for design of the multi-use path on the Uruguayna Island. It is a award that we're hoping to give to 2 separate teams. So you're going to hear Mike Tan talk about segments 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to also hear about us wanting to, assuming that this body approves and if our board approves in November, you're going to hear about us wanting to come back to you sometime early 2025 for an amendment relating to multi-use path, but it's for it's a transit only lane, which is something that we're trying to get additional funding for. And so you're going to hear other items tonight that are going to talk about some of that funding. Item 7 is going to talk about funding that's needed for 2 retaining walls that are part of that we want to add to the West Side Bridges contract that's under construction right now. It was actually work that was de-scoped because we did not get the full RAISE grant that we applied for. So we had to de-scope it, but we were able to find a way to reinsert this work with the funding action that we're hoping to get approval tonight in item 7. That work will also be beneficial to the multi-use path because it will provide that space for that 12 to 16 foot wide multi-use path, which is a class 1 like facility. Item 8 is related to another funding action that ties back to the multi-use path, and it's valued at $750,000. That is for the transit only lane, and it is our matching contribution for what's needed to design this transit only lane. And we're working with, and this is, I say we, but it's really Anna LaForte's team, who's been very instrumental in helping us move these projects forward, but they are helping us with $750,000 of our contribution. NTC will be providing the other half, the same, an additional $750,000. But they are asking us to take our action first so that they can see our cards on the table, and then they will take an action in early 2025. At that point, we will have the full $1.5 million to design this transit-only lane, and we will come back to amend. So I know it's a lot in this 30 or 60 seconds, but you will hear more of it in the next 3 items. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of intro and context as to it's deliberately trying to give you a path for a successful outcome. We're pleased, as you'll hear in tonight's presentation, to be able to position ourselves with this award of 2 contracts. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Good evening, CEC members, Mike Tan, Capital Projects, and I'm going to talk about the YBI Multi-Use Path Design and Engineering Services Contract. This is a map of the project that's going on YBI. Many of you may have seen this map before. Okay, there are different projects: Southgate, Hillcrest, Westside Bridges. The YBI Multi-Use Path is the one in orange that kind of is on the peripheral rim of all the other projects. And so it goes from the YBI bike landing on the right side where Southgate is, goes around the bottom and to the left and up to McCullough Road. So it's basically adjacent to several other projects. Here's a little bit more about the scope of the multi-use path. We are looking at installing a Class 1 multi-use path from the bike landing all the way to the ferry terminal. And that's when they can actually, users can board the ferry to downtown San Francisco. We anticipate the path will be approximately 12 to 16 feet wide. And the eastbound path is about 15 feet wide, so we're trying to keep this around consistency with that. And we would also like to install a new transit lane along Treasure Island Road. That transit lane will be from McCullough Road and Treasure Island Road intersection to the I-80 westbound on-ramp to the westbound. This project is part of the multimodal Bay Skyway project. So Bay Skyway project is from Oakland and all the way to YBI, Treasure Island, and a future phase to downtown San Francisco. All right, now the design service contract here. Duration, we're looking at 2 years or less, depending on the segments. Total design budget is $5.5 million. Funding comes from the Active Transportation Program and one Bay Area grant. Looking at design and engineering services, this is for basically 100% plans and the bid documents for those. There is a lot of coordination right now with the Westside Bridges project and the Hillcrest Road project. Those 2 projects are out in construction at the moment. We would like this YBI MUP project, as we call it, to be on an accelerated schedule so that we can start construction early. And the reason for this is so that we can actually go out to construction while Westside Bridges and Hillcrest are both in construction, to limit the amount of duration that we have to be out there to close down the roads. We anticipate design starting in January of 2025, and for this design contract, we have a DB goal of 22%. Let me just talk a little bit more about the project limit. In the earlier slide, the map I mentioned that the multi-use path is on the peripheral adjacent to several projects, and here is the actual kind of breakdown. Segment 1 is from the existing bike landing to Forest Road. That is where the Southgate project is. So that's on the top photo rendering that you see. We've got a spiral loop. We may have a different design. It may be a viaduct structure or it may be a switchback. when we get to the design phase, we'll have a better idea. There's a lot of engineering challenges out there and that we have to take into consideration. Segment 2 is from Forest Road to Treasure Island Road. This is where the Hillcrest project is right now. That's under construction. Segment 3 is along Treasure Island Road, where West Side Bridges is also under construction. Segment 4 is from the West Side Bridge limit to the McCullough Road intersection, and that's the bottom photo. That's a rendering of what this Class 1 multi-use path can look like. Let me talk a little bit more about the procurement process. We issue a request for proposals on June 18th this year. By the due date of July 19th, we received 2 proposals. We conducted interviews during the week of August 5th. And the RFP allows us to actually award either the whole contract or split the award into different segments. We felt that, it's in the best interest of the project to split the award. So in a very simple way, for segment 1 and 2, we are proposing to award those segments to TY Lin as the highest ranked firm. And for segment 3 and 4, we're proposing to award it to WMH Corporation as the highest ranked firm. And the combined DB goes 22%. This is the funding plan. There will be a separate item that will go into more details about this, but there was another separate item on the agenda that was talked about previously. This is in regard to the transit lane and an approval of the funding boards. And coming back later on. This is a summary of request action. We are requesting to approve a 2-year professional service contract to TY Lin in an amount of not to exceed for $4.35 million. This is design and engineering for segments 1 and 2. We're also requesting to approve a 2-year professional contract to WMH in an amount not to exceed $1.15 million for 35% design and engineering services for segment 3 and 4. Once the additional $1.5 million for the transit lane has been approved, then we'll come back and request and amend this for 100% design and engineering services for WMH. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presentation. My question is not this specific project, including item 6, 7, 8. We have other project going on in Yogo Vienna Island. Is there any chance you can show the whole project? What's the total budget, and then how much we spend for what is the status of the construction going on? So the end of the year or beginning of the year, we see the piece by piece from time to time, but it'll be great to see the whole picture. Like here, the project, the McKellar Road reconstruction, Yogo Vienna multi-use pass, Forest Road detours, all the project, especially transportation improvement things, it let us see the whole picture, and then total budget, and then how much we spend, and how much we need to plan to spend, so we can understand the whole picture.
Certainly we can do that. We can work with Chair Siegel on which meeting to come back. And it would look similar to this slide, but we could add the dollar values to give you the summary, but you'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Member Ford?
I'm sorry. I might be asking sort of the same question, which is, this is a really significant infrastructure project on Treasure Island. What's the background for why we're spending so much money on Treasure Island infrastructure? I was there just a couple weekends ago, and it's very lightly populated. but it was a weekend, so maybe there's greater visions I'm not aware of. Thanks.
So I can also include that in this update, but I think since there's a duplication of questions, I can say that right now there's about 2,000 residents on the island. And with the development that is happening, there will be 8,000 units, and it's expected to increase population to about 20,000. So that's why we're doing this, is to get the infrastructure ready so that we could anticipate the upcoming congestion in short answer form.
Member Bars.
Thank you, Chair. I have a concern and two questions. So my stated concern is that $40 million a mile seems high to me for a bike lane, even a class 1 multi-use path. And I love bikes. So wanted to state that for the record. So question 2, when this project was in the planning and conceptual design phase, was anything like, why did we land at a place where we need to spend $80 million on a 2 mile bike lane?
Thanks for the question. Okay, so this project goes all the way back to the Treasure Island EIR process, okay? And at the time, the Treasure Island EIR looked into putting in a bike lane, okay? But it was at a very high level. It was looking at striping in the bike lane. Okay? And it did not go into the detail as to like the actual implementation and like the actual rail. Okay. So as we were trying to build out the place, we've had discussion with planning in regard to what's going on out there, okay? And it was felt that it was better to put in the additional infrastructure that's needed to widen the road that's necessary, because the existing road will not accommodate for safety purposes, the 2 lanes, the transit lane, and then the bike lane. It's actually not wide enough, and there would be inadequate shoulder, like distance issues. And also part of the expense is that for an area such as segment 1, and there is some concern about the geotechnical conditions that are out there. On the website bridges, we are encountering a lot of like sandy soil conditions in which it's extremely difficult to actually build out there. It requires a lot of permeation grounding. Segment 1, we're basically almost on the side of a cliff. And that is what's leading to some of the costs. Of course, we will look at different options. That's why I think that I heard that, for example, the Star Loop that I looked at, we're also going to look at other less expensive options. We can also implement that. And we're also trying to balance that with requests for there is potentially a high number of users in the future, you know, along the base kind of projects. So we're looking at how to balance all those needs.
And I'll also add that while the end product is can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Anna. The end product is a class 1 bike facility. However, as one of the slides showed, for segment 1, there's a steep elevation difference. And so there's a structure that is being designed. It's almost like a freeway on and off ramp. And so it's not just, you know, having a roadway with a barrier and striping, but it's actually building a concrete structural element in order to have a user-friendly bicycle riding experience. Right now, you can ride your bicycle on the east band of the Bay Bridge, and you can traverse the island, but you're going to be hoofing it up on McCullough. And so this allows for a better rider experience, and we've got significant input from the bicycle advocates on making sure that this still happens. The other piece of it is the transit only lane. And so being able to accommodate with that congestion that I was referring to that comes from the 20,000 residents. The end goal for the mode share is to have 50% of travel modes to be not a single occupancy vehicle. And so this allows us to not only state it as a goal, but actually provide the infrastructure for that. And so, and the Bay Skyway project, this is part of the Bay Skyway project where MTC is also a partner. And when Mike mentioned the work that's happening in Oakland, that's being done by MTC. We're doing the work that's in San Francisco County. So it's a multi-agency effort in order to get people from Oakland into San Francisco by means that it's hard to imagine, but the user experience is going to be much different than it is today.
Okay, thank you. So just to recap, yes, this is a class 1 bike facility, multi-use path. But more critically, this is a project to build a new, like really truly widen the road in a place that's very hard to build in order to build that multi-use path and the transit only lane. And also like a project to build a whole brand new structure that doesn't exist today that will make it more user friendly. Did I recap that effectively?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. Oh, that helps a lot when you put it in that light. Thank you. Okay, so now to my second question, which I think might actually be for Anna Laporte, which is I looked at the funding, anticipated funding sources for this, and I think it says $25 million is TBD. So what's the level of confidence that TBD is gonna come together?
Thank you for that question. So we have several grant applications that are either pending or being written, literally right this moment. We have a pending application for an active transportation program grant, and the funding in the state program has been significantly reduced, such that the 25 million that we have applied for, we're not as optimistic as we were that we would be able to secure that funding because of the changes in the budget for that funding program for this particular cycle for that grant. But we will be applying, for example, for a RAISE grant, and that call for projects should be coming up soon. We are also preparing an application for SB1 Solutions for Congested Corridors for the full Bay Skyway project, and that would be with the West Oakland Link, with the multi-use path, and also ferry components as well. So we also have a pending grant application for ARM3 funds right now, also for 23 million, in total about 17 million to be used for this particular project. So there are a lot of applications that are out, and we are very confident about the funding for construction.
Okay, thank you.
Could you just talk a little bit about why it makes sense to split the segments between multiple contractors?
Now, at first it may not seem very obvious, okay, but due to the construction that's going on outside at the moment with Westside Bridges in construction, Hillcrest Road in construction, WMH is involved in those projects, okay, and we thought that it would be best that, if they can kind of continue those projects, and so that it'll be easier to design, we can issue change orders for those projects to actually get their construction done. Now, the Westside Bridges project, originally part of the scope along the northern side up to closer to McCollum Road, that was removed. We felt that WMH is the best, they know the most details about the Westside Bridges project, and that they can continue that segment for all the way to McCollum Road. On the other side of it, we've been working with TYNN, they actually worked on the eastbound Bay Bridge in the past. the new bridge. And Tiwa Island was also involved in the preliminary engineering phase, the environmental approval with this. They helped develop that spiral loop rendering that you see. We've got the conceptual rendering for it and some of the schematics for it. And so we felt that, they were best positioned to take on that challenge. They have a lot of bridge experience already, and that's what the spiral loop is. It's kind of a bridge structure.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Do any other members have questions or comments? Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Edward Mason. I think what needs to be questioned is, what is the projected bicycle usage of this? I remember in prior meetings, we're gonna bicycle ride from Oakland to Treasure over to Yerba Buena Island. We're gonna go over Yerba Buena Island, down the other side to catch the ferry and go into San Francisco. That's what was always said. My question is, how many people are actually gonna show up for this, for taking the cost? Why are the developers not paying for this? Lennar and the other companies that are there developing. We're having to pay the freight on this development, whether that's part of the the local code to do it, because when the Navy said, oh, here, we're gonna give this to you for free, I remember vividly seeing all the politicians lined up with San Francisco in the background, and they're down there at Building 1, clapping and everything, and not acknowledging the cost that we are now incurring for all the infrastructure that is there. So the question is, why are the developers not paying the freight on some of this? It just baffles me as to how we allow this to occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking for public comments. And there is none.
Thank you. Member Bars?
Can I ask a question based off of Mr. Mason's comment? Is that okay? All right, thanks. So I wanted to, there was something that Mr. Mason said in his comment that I wanted to ask, and also something I wanted to respond to. One is, I think that TIDA, of which the SFCTA is part of, is responsible for collecting fees, and thus some of these funding is coming from the developers. I can't speak to that. Staff could probably speak to that better than me, but that was one response I wanted to make. But the question that I wanted to ask staff, based off of Mr. Mason's comment, are there ridership estimates of either the transit lane or the bicycle lane? I am aware that there is a mode share goal, but I'd like to understand if there are actual usage estimates that have been projected.
We've got the Treasure Island Transportation Implementation Plan, TITIP, that was written in 2011. It does have projections for the number of average bus users, how based on the development of the island, depending on the percent complete, already 200%. And then part of Tima's goal is kind of to monitor that and to implement this transit lane, which Tima is required to do as a mitigation measure. We felt that due to the closure of Treasure Island Road and all the construction out there, that it would be better to implement it now instead of coming back later and having to close down the road to implement it. So.
Give that to me one more time, sorry. It's better to do it now because of construction that's already underway, is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay, got it. But do we have any usage projections?
So I don't know the usage numbers and so I don't want to misquote a number, but there is a number out there, and I heard it probably an hour ago when I was on the island today with Senator Padilla's staff. We did a tour, and so we had a number of the expected ridership. So I can certainly provide that in the upcoming update. And yes, the developer is paying for some of this infrastructure. There are roadways that they're actually developing on their own, and we're doing the work that is being that will be owned by Public Works, by the city. And TIDA is also involved in the funding, so it's not just us.
If there are no more questions or comments from members, can I get a motion on this item in a second?
Motion.
Moved by member Kim. Seconded by member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 6, member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim.
Kim, I.
Kim, aye. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ing.
Ing, aye.
Ing, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Thank you so much. That puts us on item 7. Adopting a motion of support for authorizing the executive director to file an application for 5.5 million for the retaining walls, also related to the Yerba Buena as a multi-use path. This is an action item. And Nick Smith, Senior Transportation Planner, is with us to present this item.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. Tonight, I'll be presenting a 3-part action, including a resolution needed for the West Side Bridges project to accept regional housing incentive pool or HIP funds, programming of local partnership program or LPP funds, and approval of an LPP fund exchange with BATA funds. These are all intended to fund accommodations of the future YBI multi-use path, which you just heard about, within the West Side Bridges project area. So you just saw this map previously. We're focusing on where that red circle is in the West Side Bridges project area. So West Side Bridges retrofit project broke ground in June 2023 and will replace or retrofit 8 existing bridge structures. It has a current construction cost of $116 million. We have identified an opportunity to expand the scope of the project to include 2 larger retaining walls that would accommodate the future multi-use path. The 2 retaining walls together add $10 million to the cost of the project, and we propose to fund this from 2 sources, both of which are the subject of this item. This scope would be added to existing construction contracts through change orders, and these funds need to be secured by December to execute a change order, which is why we're recommending this item as final approval on first read. And we do want to point out, in fall of 2023, the board, the CAC heard and the board approved additional funds needed to accommodate the multi-use path in the Hillcrest Road area, which is the green area on the map. And that project broke ground last month. And today's actions are continuing our strategy of leveraging construction efficiencies and reducing costs by accommodating the multi-use path through projects already under construction. The 2 retaining walls in question are shown in this diagram, and they're the very thin green line at the top, and it's kind of hard to see, but a very thin red line below that. The multi-use path is that thicker light green line, and the transit lane, again, in this West Side Bridges area, is the yellow line. And that transit lane will be the subject of the next item on the agenda. So if these retaining walls are not constructed now, the West Side Bridges project will construct smaller temporary walls that will need to be demolished by the MUP project in the future, and demolition cost savings alone are estimated at upwards of $10 million. 5.5 of the 10 million to construct these walls would be funded with regional HIP funds, and the HIP program will be described in the next slide, and the remaining 4.5 would be funded through an exchange of LPP formulaic funds with BATA funds described later in the presentation. HIP is a competitive race to the top incentive program that awards local jurisdictions for producing or preserving affordable housing. In March of this year, San Francisco was awarded $38.5 million in HIP funds. And this month, the mayor's office submitted a list of recommended projects to MTC that included this 5.5 for West Side Bridges. MTC requires that localities adopt a board-approved resolution of local support by the time of HIP programming expected in December. And we are working to secure funds for their training walls as soon as possible so we can execute the change order I mentioned and stay on track without impacting the West Side Bridges construction schedule. So for the next portion of the funds, the 4.5 million, we have identified San Francisco's LPP formulaic funds as the best available source. However, because of program requirements, LPP funds cannot be added to an already awarded construction contract. As a result, we worked to develop a solution with our partners at BATA, who have an interest in this MUP project because it is because it's part of the larger multimodal-based Skyway effort in which BATA is a project partner on the West Oakland side. We are recommending a fund exchange between SFCTA LPP funds and flexible BATA toll funds, with the BATA funds being used on the retaining walls and the LPP funds to be programmed to a project of BATA's choice, likely a Caltrans bridge painting project. And programming of the 4.5 million in LPP funds is conditioned on MTC Commission approval of the 4.5 million in BATA funds for the retaining walls, which is expected in January 2025. The HIP funds, along with the BATA funds, so in total 10 million, would be amended into the West Side Bridges construction contract through a SFCTA board action in early 2025. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks so much for the presentation. Member Ortega?
Hi, I hope I'm asking what will be a very silly question, but it struck me as odd that you said that there were originally going to be temporary restraining walls built that would then have to get replaced at a later date. And then we want to avoid doing that by building these more permanent restraining walls. But why was the plan to build temporary restraining walls if the conditions include very sandy land and earthquake zones?
Hi, thank you for the question. So when we applied for RAISE grant funding, we did not get the full amount. And so what we did is we had to de-scope these retaining walls. And so because these retaining walls were more accommodating towards the multi-use path, so the thought was that we would seek funding at a later date, design the multi-use path, and then address these retaining walls. So instead, we did have there was one temporary retaining wall that we extended the length of in order to be able to button up the project by the time it finishes construction and then have a separate project. Now, if you recall, several months ago, we asked this committee and also the board to take an action on Hillcrest, which would prevent us from installing a temporary wall and having to come back. So what happened was when we got to a point where we were able to get the additional funding, I wanted to basically reinsert this work and not have to have a temporary wall, but basically it was a way to keep the project going because we had a significant shortfall and we were not able to build the $85 million project until we got the federal funding, which we did thank Senator Padilla's staff today. But yeah, that's the reason.
And if I could just add that the original scope was to build a class 2 facility in the West Side Bridges project and also with Hillcrest. And so what this additional funding will be doing is building larger walls and a wider roadway to accommodate the multi-use path now, as opposed to building a shorter wall in a different location and having to rebuild it later when the multi-use path is implemented.
Okay, so basically what happened is that we changed the scope of the project slightly with that. We expanded the scope. And then because the construction's already happening, we just want to do it all at once, which seems like the logical step to me because I hate how California roads are always under construction. I have a crack in my windshield because I got a pebble because of 101 and I'm like, pain in the butt. So I would like less construction overall, so that'd be great. So this is basically the project expanded and we now have to find funding sources so that we can do the work when it's actually happening. And so this is a hypothetical question. I don't necessarily want this to be true. What happens if you get the funding to build the class 1 multi-use path, but don't get the funding to build the retaining wall that is needed for it?
This does allow us to build a retaining wall for the multi-use path.
Yeah, but I guess like my question is there's a bunch of different funding sources that are coming together right now. It feels like this, you said 2 different funding grants for this, and that was different than the one that we just did before this, or maybe I'm just getting them all confused.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here tonight, but ultimately, the funding that is for the retaining walls is to construct. This is for doing a change order to an existing construction contract. The item that Mike Tan presented is for the design of the full scope of the multi-use path. So we're not constructing the multi-use path. We have to be very careful with our wording here of what we're doing at West Side Bridges. We are putting retaining walls in to accommodate the multi-use path.
So you don't have to go back when we add the multi-use path.
Correct.
Okay. That's clear now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Is there any public comment on this item?
Thank you. I'm still trying to figure this out, and I wish it was, is the yellow on this going to be the transit lane coming back to San Francisco? And is the purple the transit lane going to Treasure Island on this? I assume this is on the west side of Yerba Buena Island.
Purple's the general lane coming off the Bay Bridge, general traffic lane.
General traffic.
Yeah, general traffic.
And the bus.
And the bus, heading to Treasure Island, heading to Treasure Island from San Francisco.
Okay, and the yellow is the dedicated lane.
Correct. What was previously a general lane.
Right.
General on-ramp, which is now closed because West Side Bridges is under construction, and there's a new general traffic on-ramp on the north side of the island. What was previously that on-ramp will be for transit only. So it will give transit a faster route onto the Bay Bridge towards San Francisco.
Okay, because I know that trying to get on to the lower deck of the bridge is always a challenge, believe me. I've done it many times, so. Okay, that clarifies that for me, as to, yeah, okay. I guess that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking for remote public comments. And there is none.
Great, public comment on this item is closed. If there are no objections, we could take this same house, same call. Not hearing any objections.
Sorry, so you
Oh.
still need a motion in a second.
Thank you, yes, thank you. Can I get a motion in a second on this item? Member report? Motion approved. Seconded by member Milford Rosales. And we can take it same house, same call without objection. Great, motion is approved. That puts us on item 8, which is to adopt a motion of support to allocate $3.35 million in Prop L funds and appropriate $750,000 in Prop AA funds for 2 requests. So this is an action item. And we have Nick Smith again, Senior Transportation Planner, to present this item. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. So this presentation includes 2 Prop L and Prop A allocation requests. These are time sensitive requests. The Prop AA allocation requires a contract amendment for work to progress, while the Prop L request has timely use of funds, a timely use of funds deadline to award the project contract by December, which is why we are recommending final approval of this item on first read. This first request for $750,000 in Prop AA funds is for the design phase of the YBI multi-use path transit lane that we just discussed. The YBI MUP project, the transit lane portion will design a 0.6 mile westbound transit only lane from Treasure Island to the Bay Bridge. The lane will benefit emergency vehicles and expedite up to 15,000 transit trips to San Francisco and the East Bay by the time Treasure Island is fully built out in 2042. These Prop AA funds will fund half the design of the transit lane scope, with BATA committing to fund the other half of design. BATA will bring its allocation to MTC Commission this December after this allocation is approved. This request is time sensitive, as I mentioned, as we need to return to the board in early 2025 to add these Prop AA funds and the BATA funds through an amendment to the same design contract that was considered earlier in the agenda. Next, we have a second request from SFMTA for $3.35 million in Prop L funds to construct the 13th Street Safety Project. The project includes safety and accessibility improvements, including signal upgrades, protected bikeways, curb modifications, travel lane removal, and repaving on 13th Street and Dubose Avenue. The Transportation Authority programmed $1 million to the project in 2023. However, costs have increased by $2.7 million due to the complex location under US 101, which requires extensive coordination with Caltrans, construction contract bids that came in over the engineer's estimate, and construction support costs, particularly for traffic routing and security, that are higher than originally anticipated. SFMTA was able to identify funds to cover some of the cost increase. However, lower than expected revenues from other sources have led SFMTA's need to request an additional $2.35 million from Prop L beyond the $1 million already programmed, which would be reprogrammed through a 5YPP amendment from a placeholder for implementation of recommendations from the biking and rolling plan. This request is seeking a waiver of Prop L policy that funds will be allocated prior to advertising a contract necessitating expenditure of Prop L funds. It is time sensitive because SFMTA must award the contract by December in order to meet requirements of the state LPP grant that the project received. And after contract award and construction, the project is scheduled to be open for use by the end of 2026. So we're happy on the TA side to take questions on the Prop AA request, and we do have an SFMTA project manager here to speak to the 13th Street project.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members? seeing any. Is there any public, member Bars?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, this is on. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just, so for the 13th Street Safety Project, this is a $12 million project of which we're being asked to allocate like quarter that essentially, right? Is that right? What is the outcome? Like, what are we gonna get at the end of this $12 million investment?
Do we have the SFMTA project manager who wants to speak to that?
Yes, hi there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Wong. I'm the project manager for the 13th Street Safety Project at SFMTA. I just wanted to share a little bit more about the scope of this project, which includes protected bikeways on 3 very complex blocks of 13th Street spanning over to Dubose Avenue. This corridor has been on the Vision Zero High Injury Network for quite some time. And we have seen a history of collisions along this 3-block span. This project is intended to address those safety issues and improve not only the bicycle connectivity within this area, but also to improve pedestrian safety, bringing a lot of our accessibility features up to standard, as well as calming this stretch as drivers are accessing the freeway on and off ramps. Is our belief that drivers should use our city surface streets in a way that is more befitting of local travel.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. So the major addition is a protected bikeway where one does not exist today along 3 blocks. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the improvement would be a protected bikeway for 3 blocks. The bikeways would feature concrete medians in its buffer space, as opposed to other bikeways that you might see in the city that use plastic delineators. I should also mention that the bikeway is really enabled by signal upgrades at each of these intersections. And the signal upgrade is really the most intensive work that this project is bringing.
Okay, thank you. So new signals, which I recognize that many of our traffic signals are very old, and so this is probably a major improvement. But essentially it is a protected bikeway with concrete for 3 blocks. And because of working with Caltrans, it's more expensive than we originally anticipated. Okay, I just, is there a number of projected users of this improved roadway?
Yeah, so as part of this project, we have been performing traffic modeling in very close coordination with Caltrans. And we do have data that's collected both pre and post pandemic, especially looking at vehicle volumes along the roadway, but also pedestrian crossings and bicycle ridership. In particular, we have seen hundreds, probably over 400 cyclists pass through the Dubose and Valencia Street intersection, as well as the 13th Street and Folsom Street intersection. As you know, Valencia Street and Folsom Street are both very popular north-south routes. And we believe that the this 3 block gap would definitely offer the opportunity for those cyclists to travel on.
Okay, thank you.
Member Board.
Thank you. I think some of the questions here is just the map is really truncated. Which 3 blocks specifically are the ones with the bike lane, and do they connect to those bike facilities on Folsom and Valencia?
Yes,
And-
exactly.
Okay, and then it also says removal of a travel lane. Does that mean this is gonna go from like basically a 6-lane road to how big, this is a road a bicyclist passes and does not generally ride along. And so a bike facility here, especially one at $12 million, I have a lot of other bike facilities that could use $12 million in the city, which would have higher impact to actual cyclists. So, and not cars, which is, it was impacted by signals. So anyway, yield my time.
Yeah, if I may provide a response to that feedback. Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. As part of this project, in order to reallocate some of the roadway space for the bikeway, we would be removing 1 vehicle travel lane in each direction. But in addition to the bikeway, again, I think that the largest cost of this project is really for the signal upgrades. That is the primary bulk of this cost. And to be honest, I think like no one has really touched this area pretty much since the earthquake. And a lot of that cost is to rehabilitate these signals and to upgrade them to current standards, while also enabling the proper phasing for the bikeway.
Member Milford Rosales.
Thank you very much. So building off Member Ford's comments here, so forgive me I guess I'm using Google Maps, the highway is over this, it's kind of hard to tell, but from my understanding, this looks like bike lanes being added, or the green bike lanes that are shown here look like they're on Mission and Otis, where they cross the area where Dubose and 13th turn into each other. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I can address that comment. So the graphic that's currently displayed on the slide right now is actually turned 90 degrees. If there were a north arrow, that north arrow would be pointing to the right.
Okay.
And the bikeway the bikeway would be east-west. Yeah, I know it's really difficult to sometimes drop a pin underneath the freeway.
Helps significantly. Okay. Before this, I was looking at this and thinking, I never ride north-south on that area. I don't go under the highway there because it looks bad, and it looks, I guess the triangle that Dubose makes look like the triangle there too. Okay, thank you very much for that. This is this with the bike lane, I guess going left, there's only gonna be an eastbound bike lane coming from Valencia. Correct?
This project would implement both eastbound and westbound, both directions.
14th Street below.
Yeah, I guess looking here, I know that I frequently ride under the highway, but I always try to leave by Folsom because that's where the bike lanes end under the highway. And I guess I'm a little clear how well this is going to connect to there, since we can barely see a block in the diagram, and it's also rotated. And then looking the other way, I would be going towards Valencia, biking in this area, except that it also doesn't extend. I guess even with the knowledge that the diagram is rotated, I feel like I don't have a good idea of looking at this, what what is actually being connected, or if this is like on Third Street where they have random chunks of the bus island and protected bike lane and nothing else for like 3 blocks in either directions.
It completes the connection from where the bike lanes end, going both directions, all the way to Valencia. So both east and westbound, you'll have a protected route under the freeway, all the way under 13 to Valencia.
All right, thank you very much. That does sound excellent. For a very brief follow-up, are we going to be doing like weird custom concrete pouring stuff on this? Or is there going to be some kind of standardized thing that we can drop in that does not cost nearly as much money?
Yeah, all of the design specifications are per San Francisco Public Works specs and also Caltrans. And that's sort of one of the unique pieces of this project is that we do have to make sure that those designs meet both of those agencies' standards.
So I guess just to clarify, what I'm referring to, like in other cities I visited, it's very common to drop K-rail or even just like precast curbs like what you'd see in a parking lot. And the last protected project that I saw going here was these custom molds poured on Third Street near the baseball stadium, where they were sending people out, like digging it up, putting in special molds, filling it in, and although they're excellent, it seems a lot more time and cost intensive. And I was just curious if there was if we were looking at moving towards a, I guess, more cost effective and time effective way to install these protections, or if they were going to be more of the same.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more about those concrete buffers, since I know a little bit of background on the Third Street project as well. For a lot of our simpler, kind of more quick build projects, we do partner with Public Works, who are able to use in-house crews to actually construct those concrete buffers, as you mentioned, the ones that you see on Third Street. And also you can see them along Division Street, east of this project area. So in the past, we have done improvements along Division from Folsom all the way up to, say, Townsend Circle. And those buffers that you see are actually among our cheaper ways of delivering that. For this project, we are also trying to use that construction method. But in addition, there are specific locations where we will have to do a little something a little bit more custom. For example, at the freeway off-ramp at Mission and Otis Street, that is a location where we would have to do something a little bit more unique to route cyclists through a very complex, like, off-ramp sort of situation.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Member Ortega?
I actually want to talk about that off-ramp because so something that is kind of absolutely confusing to me is I used to bike this quite frequently. I don't anymore. My office route and where I live just geographically it doesn't make sense, but I remember biking this. It's like the most harrowing bike ride ever. And all I can remember thinking is move the bike path. I didn't want to be on this road. I don't feel like a protected bike lane is the answer because I don't think it should be there where a freeway exit is. A freeway exit where people are getting off the highway, going extremely fast. And I understand that there is signal control there, but one of the things that the city has also been lacking is enforcement for that signal control. I don't understand why we're trying to jam a bike path in there when there are tons of other streets in this area that could be more viable. Like we It did not help that this map was turned 90 degrees, by the way. I just want to be like very transparent about this. I could not figure out where this was for like 10 minutes. And I feel like by not expanding the area, by not showing the linkage, you're proposing a project that on many levels just doesn't seem to make sense. And I think that's where a lot of these questions are coming from. So I guess more my comment is, what is the exact improvement plan to ensure that bicyclists are not going to get hit on that freeway exit where people are speeding off of 101? If that's the goal of this project, which is my understanding, what is that? Because the side note here is that 101 exit ramp is one of the worst. It's too short. Like, we don't have room. I'm not trying to advocate for tons of expansion of highways in the city, but that exit ramp is already increasingly unsafe as a, like, even as a driver. Forget a bicyclist, forget a pedestrian in the area. Like that, I'm not understanding why we're trying to put more bicyclists in the path of that exit unless that exit ramp is also changing, which has not been brought up yet. And I'm perhaps just unaware, but I would like to understand the exact plan for that exit ramp in that area.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. I believe there is a fuller image of the project proposal within the packet that I was able to find online while I was accessing this agenda. And I've made some call outs as part of those attachments to the allocation request packet that shows the larger image because it is kind of so complicated. In addition, I just want to reiterate that I guess in addition to just to the bikeway, this project does remove one travel lane. And in previous projects and in other studies that we're aware of, when we remove one travel lane, that is something we call road diet and does have an effect in slowing vehicle driver speeds. And so we're hoping that it's the combination of these improvements will have that sort of effect in slowing down vehicle traffic in this area. We are also pursuing this project due to recommendations from the SFCTA's SOMA Freeway Ramps Intersection Safety Study, and also from the SF Planning Department's Market Octavia Plan Amendment, which is formerly called the Hub. And so this is an implementation project very much like in direct relation to these recommendations.
But just to be clear, there's nothing actually changing about that highway ramp.
That is correct.
Member Margarita?
Yeah, I just wanted to mimic the same concerns that Member Ortega just brought up and the other members. It doesn't seem like it's going to make bikes safer. Even just with what I read, the map and everything, and so it just sounds really unsafe. And again, maybe it's my confusion with regards to where it's located. How big is where exactly are the signals going to be placed? How many? How long is the street? I know you keep on saying 13th Street, but is it just right there by DuBose, or is it going to be extended? Because I have the same concerns that Member Rosales brought up with regards to if it's just going to be a short span, it just doesn't make any sense. And that off-ramp is already crowded for people coming into the city and out of the city. And so it just sounds like it's going to make it more congested. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. Just to clarify on the geography of the project, so this consists of 3 blocks. On the easternmost block is named Dubose Avenue, and that's from Valencia up to Mission and Otis. And then the middle block is where the street is now named 13th Street, from Mission and Otis to South Van Ness Avenue. And then the easternmost block is 13th Street from South Van Ness Avenue to Folsom Street. So Rainbow Grocery would be like the eastern end of this project, whereas the Valencia Commercial Corridor would be the western end of this project. So both Folsom and Valencia Street are both very well-used bicycle corridors, and this project would directly provide a separated and direct connection to both of those routes.
Thank you.
Our cards back up from Member Bars.
Thank you. I wanted to air some of my concerns and my reaction to this, and I did want to thank you, Jennifer Wong, for pointing out the graphic in the memo. It is very helpful, so thank you for drawing my attention to that. Friends and colleagues of mine are in the Muni working group, or the Muni funding working group, excuse me. And I hear, like, we are about to be in a time of austerity. And like I heard Anna Laforte mention earlier this evening that like funds for the ATP grant cycle were dramatically reduced. And like, it just feels like if the goal is to have a connection between Folsom and Valencia, it seems like a simpler route would be to go 1 block south on 14th Street and figure out how to do it on 14th Street and not deal with the complexities of the freeway off-ramp, per Member Ortega's point. If the goal is signals, I guess I'd like to understand who the main beneficiaries are. If the goal is pedestrian safety, I feel like there's probably lower cost ways to do that. It feels like we're trying to do a lot, and in so doing, we're getting to a price tag of like $12 million for 3 blocks. And I'm personally just really struggling with that. So I hear it's certainly important to upgrade our signals. I don't want to dismiss that. I understand that is apparently the main cost driver, but under this freeway is not a particularly nice place to bike, and I don't even think it's a particularly intuitive connection to get from Valencia to Folsom. So I'm just really struggling with this, and I also do appreciate this is an implementation of plans that were done. I just think those plans were done in a time where we were dealing with a different fiscal reality than we are dealing with today. So that is a comment, not a question, but I just wanted to share that with my colleagues here on the CAC about my concerns about this project.
Member Ford?
Oh, if I could just add, first of all, I just want to apologize for the graphic. It certainly was not intended to cause confusion, only intended to cause clarity, and that is clearly not what happened. So definitely apologies on that, and I hope folks have found the map in the packet of materials. It's on page 82 of the packet that I have, although I know page numbers are different when you're logging in online. And then lastly, in part, the reality of where we are with the financial situation is that other local sources were not available for the project also, and that is another driver of the funding need. We did program $1 million to the project a year and a half ago, and since then, some of the local revenues that were anticipated to be funding the construction cost have not come through. This is leveraging other state grants that do have timely use of funds requirements on it. And so that is always an intention of the Prop L program, is to help other people's money go further. And so just to give some context, also signals are one of the primary drivers of the cost of the project. However, working with Caltrans to put those signals on Caltrans right of way has also caused a significant cost of the project, and also making some design elements that, because it is so close to a Caltrans facility and in the vicinity of the freeway, that are necessitated by that location. So just wanted to call out a couple of things. Thank you.
So I think the crux of the comments here today, and at least my opinion of this, is that the bike lane component of this project is really nonsensical. And I'm wondering what level of funding is required if that component was out of the project and it retained its other features of the signal, the traffic lane modification, and the bulb outs. But we didn't think that this was gonna attract a lot of bike lane traffic off of 14th Street. And could we get this project moving and get more for our money by not forcing a bike lane against 4 lanes of traffic underneath the freeway? Like, it's like the worst place to spend time. Yeah. Anyway, that's my question. How much less would you need if you didn't have to do the bike lane?
I would say I previously had come up with this calculation, which I don't know off the top of my head right now, but I can definitely get back to you on that. I do know that a significant amount of this total project cost is due to the signals. There is other scope that I haven't mentioned so far that includes pedestrian refuge islands for this corridor, as well as upgrading our accessible pedestrian signals and widening the sidewalk at certain locations along this corridor, and also repaving of the street.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the concerns of my colleagues. I do wanna speak to this a bit as somebody that lives in the Haight and often bikes to points east, like Potrero or Bayview or Dogpatch. I personally currently have to do kind of a funky wiggle, like up Market Street and then back down either 11th or 8th to Folsom to avoid this area. And then I usually do end up taking DeVos east from Folsom. And this would be a very convenient connection for me. It would make it pretty much a straight shot. So I know that that's clearly not the popular opinion here, but I do appreciate these improvements. It is a harrowing place to bike east of Folsom on DeVos right now. I would wonder with this level of cost and investment, whether it would be possible to extend this connection all the way west to Market from Valencia if we're making this investment in this connection. I share the thoughts about like wiggling a block south to 14th as an alternative. I currently prefer DeVos because 14th is a one-way street with a door zone bike lane, and I hate that more than I hate the freeway with the unprotected bike lane. But I guess I am very appreciative of the investments in this connection. It is sorely needed. I appreciate the concerns of my colleagues about the exact implementation. Question for you is apologies if you mentioned this, but the signal upgrades, are they necessary regardless of this project, or are they needed for the bike lane and pedestrian improvements anyway?
It would be the latter. Well, a little bit of both. The signals here are fairly old. And so it's kind of in tandem, I would say.
Okay, if it's only needed for this project, I do think it would be worth exploring whether it would be cheaper to route around this part of DeBose and 13th Street. I do appreciate the investments in pedestrian infrastructure. They're, as unpleasant as it is, a lot of people do walk around in this area connecting between the Mission and Soma. So really appreciate that, and I think that's extremely necessary regardless of the direction of the bike facilities. So just some feedback to consider. Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments from members, is there a public comment on this item? Oh, I'm sorry.
I did just want to make a comment about the time sensitivity, and that because there are state grants that are funding this project that are really the drivers of strict timely use of funds requirements that are on the project. And so at least one of the sources requires that the contract is awarded like within the next month. So just wanted to put that out there, that there are constraints around timing for this project that would be indicative of funds being put at risk if there are delays in a contract. So I just want to flag that.
Thank you. Oh, Member Margarita?
Thank you for that comment. And for the state funding, how much funding specifically is that one that's coming in that we would lose if it doesn't get approved within the next month? Sorry, if we could. Thank you.
There are a lot of different grants that are on this particular source. It does seem that one of the smaller of the grants is driving that timing. But I need to confirm. I think it is the local partnership program funds that are programmed by the CTC. However, you don't want to lose grants because it looks poorly on San Francisco to be giving up any funds. So that's not the intended outcome of you don't want to get this far along in the process ideally and put funds into a statewide pool. So, but there are also Caltrans shop funds, and I would need to check what the timely use of funds requirements are on that particular source. That has nearly 2 million. And then, actually, no, that has over 2 million. And then there are the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities is also a state grant. So I need to look into the specifics. I'm very familiar with local partnership program because that is the source that we do manage. But other sources as well have drivers.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Edward Mason. As a pedestrian, going to the hardware store there at the intersection, you're gonna have to somehow reduce the speed and the attentiveness of the auto drivers coming off the freeway. You know, that's a danger zone there. And whether you put speed bumps in, you know, the little dot bots or whatever they call those things to alert them that they've got a problem coming down there, because as a pedestrian, you don't have a chance with the freeway traffic coming off, because everybody wants to make that right-hand turn and get on Mission and go out Van Ness Avenue. So, again, we're trying to pack 10 pounds in a 5-pound space. And considering the funding and all the other things, I'm just amazed that we're obligating this money for, I really don't think, any real benefit coming out of it in the big picture, from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment, and just a reminder, if folks want to give public comment, to use the raise hand feature. And I'm seeing no public comment.
Great, public comment on this item is closed. Mr. Mason's comment did remind me I wanted to specifically call out my appreciation for the lane removal. I think that will really help with the experience in that area. I do hope that there will be further recommendations from the Freeways study on how to make the exits and entrances particularly safer for pedestrians. Member Mars.
I'm sorry, this is really my last question on this. I just need to understand where the bike path crosses the freeway off ramp. What is the control there? Like, what's the experience gonna be like for people on bikes where it crosses the off ramp?
Yeah, that off-ramp will be it will be signal controlled, is the answer.
Can I also ask about the on-ramp? It's going to be further down. The on-ramp that would be at 13th and South Van Ness.
Yes, that will also be signal controlled.
And so right now with the people exiting from the freeway coming down, right now it's 2 lanes. Are you saying it's gonna be then only 1 lane?
Currently, as you exit the freeway onto at the Mission Street exit, it currently is 1 lane and it will remain as is. Getting on the freeway at South Van Ness, there is a double right turn lane to get onto the little circle, and that will also remain.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions and comments from members, can I get a motion and a second on this item? Give me a motion to propose it, just any kind of motion.
If I may, Chair Siegel, this is Maria Lombardo. Sorry to be remote. If it pleases the chair and the CAC, you could also sever these 2 requests and vote on each of them separately.
Is there a motion to sever the
Oh,
requests?
that doesn't even require a motion, Chair. You can just do that if it makes sense.
Would that help with, okay. Okay, can we, can I get a motion on the transit lane specifically? Member Barnes? Seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Okay. On the motion to allocate 3.35 million in Prop L funds to 13th Street Safety.
Oops, sorry, Amy. It's the other
I think I
one.
switched
Do
it
the
around.
transit
Sorry.
lane first.
Okay, transit line first. Okay. On the motion to appropriate $750,000 in Prop AA funds for the Yerba Buena Island multi-use path transit lane. Member Boris?
Boris, aye.
Boris, aye. Vice Chair Daniel? Daniel's absent. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim?
Kim, I.
Kim, aye. Member Levine? Oh, Levine absent. Apologies. Member Margarita?
Member Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ing?
Ing, aye.
Ing, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, I.
Siegel, I. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you so much.
I have to do the other one too.
Right, I was gonna ask for, I think I have to ask for a motion on the other item too. Or no,
Yes.
can I get a motion on the 13th Street safety project? Moved by member, no, or, yeah, moved by member Milford Rosales.
Okay.
Seconded by member Kim. Can we get a roll call vote? Thank you.
Okay, now then, on the motion to allocate 3.35 million in Prop L funds to 13th Street Safety Project, member Bars?
Bars abstain.
Bars abstain. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford?
Ford abstain.
Ford abstain. Member Kim?
Kim abstain.
Kim abstain. Member Levine? Levine absent. Member Margarita?
Margarita abstain.
Margarita abstain. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ing?
Ing, I.
Ing, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, abstain.
Ortega abstain. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, I.
Siegel, aye. There are 3 ayes. The motion is not approved.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. That puts us on item 9, which is to approve a motion, adopt a motion of support to allocate $2.6 million and appropriate $139,000 in Prop L funds with conditions for 2 requests. And this is an action item. And Linda Beret, Transportation Planner, and Alex Pan, Transportation Planner, will be giving this presentation.
Hello, good evening. This presentation includes 2 Prop L requests. So this first request is for the bus transit signal priority signal equipment. And this is for 2.6 million for the construction phase of the project. This project will upgrade and replace existing bus transit signal priority related devices, including radios, controller equipment, network equipment, and CCTV equipment that's nearing the end of its useful life. Funds will also be used for network optimization at intersections already equipped with the bus transit signal priority radios and antennas. The new equipment to be purchased includes bus transit signal priority intersection equipment, traffic signal controller equipment, and networking equipment. The project benefits include improved transit performance, updated traffic signal timing to latest standards, remote monitoring, and repair and replacement of network equipment. The transit signal priority is used to extend green lights or to bring up green lights earlier to prioritize transit vehicles that are approaching the intersection. And the transit signal priority improves the odds that a transit vehicle sees a green light or gets a shorter red light, thus reducing delays and improving transit reliability and transit travel times. And the useful life of aging variable messaging signs will be extended by upgrading certain parts of the signs that are now obsolete and reaching the end of its life. So parts to be upgraded include the variable messaging signs controllers, the power supplies, and upgraded LED panels. And my colleague Alex will be presenting the next Prop L request.
Good evening, CAC members. I'm Alex Pan, a transportation planner at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. This request is for $139,890 in Prop L funds for grant match for the Bayview Street Safety and Truck Relief Study. We have received a $525,000 Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant to advance the recommendation in the Connect SF Streets and Freeway Strategy. The study will develop recommendations to improve freight circulation and safety in the Bayview neighborhood, as well as establish guidance for strategy applications that can be used in other city, regional, and state freight planning efforts. Recommended improvements will include safety improvements to reduce conflicts between large vehicles and other road users, and policies and programs to increase the adoption of low and zero emission delivery vehicles. As part of the study, we will conduct public and stakeholder engagement and establish a technical advisory committee, which will have representatives from the goods movement sector. We will begin the study this winter and expect to complete the study and bring final recommendations to the board in June 2027.
Okay, and with that, we are able to answer questions, and we also have the project manager for the bus transit signal priority online.
Great, thanks so much for the presentation. Member Kim?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for presentation. I have a question, TSP. Recently I saw a newspaper talking about 212 million for up-to-date train control system. And also this is a part of total 700 million muni metro control system. Is the TSP part of those, the whole system upgrade plan? So my question is there any interference between two different systems, if not separate? So I know train control is not is about the subway, but we have a lot of streetcar. So if operating the same system, we have bus and streetcar. So those systems so working together or separate? That's my question.
Thank you for that question. I believe we have MT on the line, and I invite Liliana to respond.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Liliana Ventura. I'm the program manager for the, sorry, Intelligent Transportation System for SFMTA. We currently have two separate systems. We have a system for rail TSP and a system for bus TSP. The train control upgrade project that is going to be happening, or that has been recently approved, I think the initial phase is underground, but for the on-street portion of it, we are leveraging that project to improve and potentially look into a new rail TSP system as part of that project. But currently the two systems are different. This specific request for today is for our bus TSP.
Yeah, so my understanding is right now this new TSP and old system two separate, but in the end, MTA has a new metro control system and then it'll integrate together. Is it correct? Or still in the future separate?
No, so TSP technology is moving towards cloud-based, and we anticipate that in the future we will be able to have a system, the same system that will integrate both bus and rail TSP.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Seeing any, is there public comment on this item?
Thank you, Edward Mason. In reading the documentation, I'm glad to see that they're updating the signal timing. In my recollection in the Wayback Machine at 21st and Mission Street, probably 25 years ago or so, a pedestrian was killed by a bus going through the intersection. And every time I go by 21st and Mission, I just hope that, it won't happen again. And I'm glad to see that in your documentation that you're updating the signal timing consideration. I'm just curious as to what the estimated life of the new equipment will be. I realize things are evolutionary and they will fade, but what is the expected life of the new system? And I assume, following up on the question here, that there's no signal interference between the surface light rail portion of the communication-based transit system, which is in the subway, but it is also monitoring the surface light rail. And so it's going to be sending out signals. And so I just hope that everything's on a different frequency or whatever, and also not subject to being hijacked or, what's the proper term that you use for, getting in there and, having that by someone going in with the signals and getting those confused. I'm sorry, I lost the proper word for that. So, I look forward to this and, we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking for remote public comments. And there is no remote public comment.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed. Can staff answer the question about the useful life of these signals?
Yes, so to speak specifically about the ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems again, and the TSP, the typical lifespan is 15 years for the entire system. Our current bus TSP system is over 20 years old, but certain components can age faster than that, like chips and certain, bandwidth, for example, too, of our network, can become outdated within 5 to 7 years. So that's the lifespan. Our systems, that's what we are projecting as well. And with regards to what I think it was mentioned, I think the term would have been cybersecurity. Also upgrading our systems every 5-8 years allow us to implement more current cybersecurity protocols.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second on this item? Moved by Member Margarita. Seconded by Member Kim. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote on this item?
On the motion to approve item 9, Member Bors.
Bars aye.
Bors aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford.
Ford aye.
Ford aye. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim aye. Member Levine. Levine absent. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales aye. Member Ing.
Ing aye.
Ing aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks again for the presentation. That puts us on item 10, adopt a motion of support to adopt the District 1 Multimodal Transportation Plan Final Report, and this is an action item. And Lisa Paz, Principal Transportation Planner, is here with us to present this item, followed by Jean Long, Transportation Planner. Ms. Paz.
Good evening, CAC. So my name is Elisa Paz with the Planning Division at the TA, and I'll be presenting our recommendations for the District 1 Multimodal Transportation Study. I was last here in February of this year and gave an update to both the CAC and board with draft concepts that we were going to be bringing to outreach. So again, this study was requested by Commissioner Chan and is funded through the Transportation Authority's Neighborhood Program. And we are focused on resident trip making to develop concepts for the near term, safety and neighborhood connectivity improvements. And then we have long-term concepts that support longer term mode shift and greenhouse gas reductions within District 1. We did 2 rounds of outreach consisting of surveys, pop-ups, town halls, and meetings with community groups. The first round helped us identify needs, priorities, and focus corridors for improvements. And the second round helped guide refinements to the draft concepts that we brought to the public. I'm going to touch on the 7 concepts briefly. They're very consistent with what was presented in February. So these 7 concepts span the entire district. The first is on Geary, and this is to improve transit stops along the corridor with transit amenities, lighting improvements, and travel info to address personal security concerns that were raised during outreach. The next improvement is on Cabrillo. This is the full corridor. This is to upgrade the existing bike lane with green paint and conflict markings and also bring safety improvements to intersections. Then we have Balboa. This is the inner Richmond portion. So from Park Presidio to Arguello, having a boarding island, transit boarding platform, and amenities at 6 and Balboa and safety improvements at the intersections. And then for Fulton Street, there's two improvements. The first was revised based on community feedback, so the extents have changed. They are now longer to go from Arguello to 48th. Originally, we stopped at 22nd and just did 22nd to 48th. So this concept includes crosswalks and daylighting on Fulton and the avenues across the whole corridor, transit boarding platforms where they're not already in place, safety improvements at intersections, median islands paired with rectangular flashing beacons at select uncontrolled intersections. These are meant to help slow traffic and provide a waiting area if folks can't get across all the lanes of traffic at one time. And then I just want to note that this concept has two possible designs. So I'm going to touch on implementation on our next slide. And then we also have for Fulton bike improvements that create a direct connection using 22nd Avenue into Golden Gate Park, paired with Parkside improvements to create more of like a larger welcoming space or gateway into the park. Then to go to our long-term concepts, these are our district-wide concepts. We have a north-south express bus concept. This brings forward the Samtrans recommendation for San Francisco South Bay express bus service on freeways in San Francisco. Then we have a curb management strategy. So the idea is to use a curb management strategy on commercial corridors to make sure that the curbs are reflecting how the street is being used, making more space for the movement of people and goods and reducing conflicts along the curb. And then finally, we have mobility hubs at 3 priority locations that were identified through outreach. Those are Geary and Arguello, Geary and Park Presidio, and Cabrillo and La Playa. The plan includes an implementation plan, and this includes planning level cost estimates, potential funding sources, which includes grant opportunities, and next steps for detailed design. We're also, for the Fulton concept, I want to touch on that in a little bit more detail. So there's 2 possible designs for the median islands, and the nature of the corridor is very complex. There's a lot of competing uses that make up Fulton. So the design will be further developed in coordination with SFMTA. And the implementation plan is to test the designs at up to 3 locations along the corridor. The pilot will be assessing transit operations, safety, and vehicle speed impacts. And the findings from that pilot will be used to make any adjustments to the design before implementation. With that, I can take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Member Kim?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for presentation. Actually, there's 90-page wise detailed study. It took me like half day. Thank you for the District 1 nowadays main issue is Fulton. It's kind of became speedway, so it's really dangerous for pedestrian, biker, even car driver. Some crazy people speed up. So this report cover a lot of strengthening safety stuff. So I appreciate those things. And then I have a little question. It mentioned Fulton Speedway 30 mile per hour, but recently it changed it to 25 mile per hour. So yeah, I think that this needed to be updated. This report mentioned slower speed limit, but already reduced, so that's updated. And then I have a question, what is the Lander bus stop signs? Could you explain? It says, some of the, update bus shelter, it says Lander bus stop signs. And then pedestrian scale lighting.
Yeah, pedestrian scale lighting is lighting that is low. So to just provide more lighting for people who are waiting on the sidewalk. And the signage, I believe it's mentioning signage at the transit stops. Is Jean Long on the phone or MTA staff that could help answer the detail about the transit stop amenities?
And here's curbside management doesn't include Gary Boulevard because right now Gary Boulevard MTA has improvement project, that's why.
Correct.
Okay. And and then, yeah, pardon the center lines. This is new to San Francisco, so this Fulton Street is first location to apply in San Francisco.
Without MTA, I'm going to take the liberty of answering. So it's not the first location, so they have been implemented at various streets. So I know they're in the Mission, on South Van Ness. So they've been placed at different intersections around the city to help slow turns for left turning vehicles to keep the turn wide and slow. And it also helps prevent side shows.
Yeah, so it's a pretty turned out to be effective way to keep safety.
I would like to ask MTA if they are evaluating that and we could get back to you in writing.
Yeah, I mean, the Fulton is we need to reduce speed, but there's a speed camera will be installed and then more signal and also the median, a lot of safety stuff, but I'm concerning, this harden the center line, this is new, so we don't know really help or more confusing and then, so that's my question. And then, yeah, I want to, those, North-South Expressway, but, earlier, Andy Mason mentions, I don't know how many ridership justify those north and south, but we need a north and south, service for Richmond to Sunset or Richmond to Daly City or Pacifica. But those route doesn't cover that area. So I'm really concerning, we need a lot of demand. I know a lot of people working in Richmond, they leave Daly City, Pacifica, but I ask them, all of them, they drive car, they commute by car. That's why this report says from Richmond to Sunset, transportation mode is over 70% people drive. That's reality. But same thing, Richmond to Daly City, Pacifica about the same. But somehow, future plan doesn't cover those needs. So we better have some service connect Richmond to south, but not like San Jose or that area. Richmond to Daly City or Bath Station. So those kind of missing part. So I want to request any further study available for that.
Yeah, that's a good comment. So I'm gonna point to a map on page 65 and of the report. That is the draft map that Samtrans has developed in their Express Bus study that connects the Richmond, the Sunset, Daly City, and then there's two routes. One would go to SFO in Foster City and one would go to Palo Alto. So they are full service on the west side, making those connections to key destinations on the peninsula. And we can take comment of that and, for when we coordinate with Samtrans in the future.
Yeah, and then I also want a couple of comment. Recently I surveyed 14th to 28th, lot of sidewalk. We have more than 50 spots needed to repair, but all damaged by tree. But we have a fund. Already this year, we Prop L fund provide a fund for fixing damaged sidewalk, but not damaged from tree. And then we have a fund, last meeting, we fund plant new tree. But somehow there's no fund from us to fixing sidewalk damaged by tree. But Public Works, they don't have enough money. So I think this is a hidden spot. It's a really urgent issue. This year, we have 2 to 3 lawsuits happen City Hall. So city needed to pay like over $500,000 for lawsuit. Somebody fell down on the sidewalk. So we need to mention here, maybe it's not, but I want to cover, we need urgent need to repair a sidewalk as well. And second thing is, we report really analyzed, good to mention, we have a mini district, but still, how can we support the traffic between mini districts? We have a bus line, but somehow it doesn't support properly. So we might need a new bus route circling within district, but there's no mention about that, so I want to leave a comment. And also last one is mobile hub. I think the street location very reasonable. You picked the right place, I guess. But 500K per site seems like this too small. It might need a lot of infrastructure upgrade. So I have a question is, 500 is too small.
Yeah, the $500,000 estimate is for the next step of planning. So that's like a detailed planning study and siting. So that could include, right, the feasibility of like EV charging could be included in that. So that would get us to a place to do a cost estimate for implementation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Member Bars?
Thank you for the presentation. My concern in skimming this report is namely about the Cabrillo green painted bike lane. Can you give me a sec? Can you explain better why that is the recommended treatment? So NACDO no longer recommends door zone painted bike lanes unless it's very specific conditions, and those are conditions in which the buffered bicycle lane, the painted bicycle lane has buffer, which I do not believe it does on Cabrillo. And I also understand that there's been some pretty dramatic speeding related collisions on Cabrillo in recent memory, which also makes me question the applicability of a conventional bike lane. So why recommend doubling down on the painted bike lane?
Got it. The intersection treatments are aimed. The intersection treatments are aimed to slow traffic down. So that is intended to help with traffic calming and slowing speeds. And Cabrillo is quite constrained from space wise. So there are a lot of uses that there's a lot of parking use on the street. So the only way to make a protected or buffered bike lane would be to take away the parking along the full corridor. And so, we heard consistently in outreach that people do need to park their cars. So we were mindful of that, and there's just limited width of that roadway. it is a good comment, and that's something that could be explored as, you know, a next phase of improvement.
Is there a explicit goal to meet the NACDO traffic volume and speed requirements for a painted buffered bike lane?
That would be a question I would point to MTA, so I could follow up and get back to you.
Okay,
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments from members, we can go to public comment in the room first.
Thank you. Before the pandemic, Samtrans, I talked with Samtrans, and there were in excess of 20,000 cell phones that went from the Richmond district, the west side of San Francisco, down the peninsula. So there's a market for it. Whether people will, utilize it in the long term is something to see. The hard center line median, are there any plans to publicize that, to alert people that when they do make a left turn, that they need to make a wider left turn and not go over it? I think it's successful for the sideshows, and I was unaware that that may be one of the elements that they're using on that. And regarding electric charging, we say we're gonna put it in a hub, okay, but how long does it take to charge? You know, is somebody gonna drive up in the morning, charge up, connect, and then go to work, and 8 hours later come back? Really taking away the opportunity midday possibly for somebody else to use it. I've read where charging now is being tested at light poles. And since you got the electricity at the light pole, you can just drive up to the curb next to it and then connect up and do your charging. And especially in San Francisco, because most people want to charge at home. Well, if you're in an apartment and don't have a garage, you're not going to be able to charge. So your second option is you're going to have to park in the street or go to a hub. So if you can connect up to a light pole that's been modified, I think that needs to be considered. That's not revolutionary. I've read about it. It's being tested and done. So I leave my comments to that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there remote public comment on this item?
Yes, I'm going to the first caller, Richard Rothman. Richard,
Good evening. My name is Richard Rothman. I live in the outer Richmond, right near 37th and Fulton. In every meeting they've had since they started, I've always mentioned that you need to do something about 37th and Fulton, and it's not mentioned in the report. This is a dangerous intersection. It's right near, it's the intersection where the senior center is. They're going to expand to the senior center and put a senior center playground in. They have it set up now, MTA. I'm a senior and I have a hard time walking, and I can barely make it across the street when I press the button. And if I don't press the countdown button, you have a shorter time. The countdown button should go on automatically when the white turns green, because not all seniors press the button. Press the button there. And there's been 2 accidents, one fatal in the intersection there, and MTA has done nothing. And I've told your staff, and I don't know why they're disregarding 37th and Fulton, the same with MTA. In fact, all the signals between Fulton, between 25th Avenue and Ocean are set shorter so they can speed the bus up. So what's more important, speeding the bus up or Richard Rothman crossing Fulton Street safety? So please add that into your report. And otherwise, it was a good report. We need to emphasize more north-south traffic if Prop K passes. So please add that addition, 37th and Fulton, and make it safe for seniors to cross the street. Thank you very much. And thank you for your your work.
Thank you, caller. Going to the second caller, we have David Alexander.
How's it going? This is Dave Alexander with Richmond Family San Francisco. Just want to thank Alicia Paz and her team for their work on this. Also want to thank Angela Yu from Supervisor Chan's office. Just a couple of points here. The green paint on Carbillo is laughable. Residents don't care. There needs to be more robust treatments because it is a slow street. So I would actually recommend putting stronger treatments at intersections. In terms of hardening the center line, we were pushing that all along. I really appreciate those. Hearing pilot scares me because per Gene Long, there was a pilot in a study done, I believe it was 2009 or 11, that had ped refugee islands. And then the study said that they weren't effective and or went against transit priority. So we do know this is a transit priority corridor. We love Muni. We want Muni to run fast and efficient, but it scares me when I hear 3 intersections as a pilot. Lastly is unsignalized intersections. Hawk signals are not going to stop speeding drivers down Fulton. I see it all the time. I cross Fulton with my kids on the weekends and during the week to go to soccer at the polo fields and the beach chalet. There needs to be more robust treatments to slow drivers at those unsignalized intersections further down at Fulton past 22nd. Again, Hawk treatments at signalized intersections. I would push this commission to go one step further on these treatments. I think it's a great start, but really push you guys to go one step further, see how the pilot goes, and then let's see what the feedback is. Thank you so much for your work on this. Thanks.
Caller. And going to the next caller, we've got Paul.
Hey folks, first of all, thank you for all the work that was done putting the study together. I'm a board member of Walk San Francisco. I'm part of the Richmond Family Transportation Group. And we really advocated for some changes on Fulton from 22nd to Arguello. I live on Fulton and 12th. I have close calls with my daughter all the time when we walk in a stroller. So I just, again, really appreciate the effort that went in here, and especially from Angelina from Supervisor Chan's office. My one big feedback, I guess, is I know there's 2 diagrams for the for Fulton, and I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen. I could do that if it's helpful. But the bottom diagram is preferred to me on page 59 if you all want to take a look, because there's pedestrian safety zones that makes the intersection so much safer because it shortens crossing distances. And I worry about the diagram above because it doesn't do enough to keep cars away from the curbs. And, that's the one thing I see all the time is cars hopping the curb. And what I don't like about that diagram above is the lane veers closer to the curb, and it gets the cars closer to my daughter and I as we cross the street and other pedestrians. So I actually favor the diagram on the bottom just because it gives us that buffer with the pedestrian safety zones. But it doesn't sound like that's being put into place at the unsignalized intersections, and that's super problematic to me because cars are going to go fast regardless, and I feel like if we're going to do this study, we should do it right. And that's, I know I'm out of time, but that's my one piece of feedback. Thank you.
Caller. Next caller, we've got Al.
Oh, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Sean, it's Al. Thank you again for this study. I know we only have a short amount of time. I similarly agree with Paul regarding the intersection noted on page 59 for Fulton. I do, based on looking at this information that SFCTA has provided. I do wonder about on Cabrillo, where we're talking about these unprotected bike lanes, which not helpful, to be honest. Bulb outs are absolutely wonderful, but I know as soon as you touch any sewer systems, you immediately exponentially increase the amount of money that is required. And has SFCTA, SFMTA, Caltrans, is there a potential for tactical placemaking in the similar style that has been championed and succeeded in Baltimore with their DOT, which could significantly decrease the cost of creating pedestrian bulb outs, which could be modified if needed. And then going back to Fulton, I do think that a more robust study of the actual conditions along Fulton should be done. I know that a lot of the data that is noted is about, where conflicts happen. Well, that's not necessarily representative of how dangerous it is, which leads people to not actually cross Fulton in many, many, many locations. And so I feel like the study in this way is flawed, and there should be a lot more robust infrastructure to connect pedestrians, which was, by all accounts, the most important thing from the SF planning document in 2016. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Just wanted to check on one last person who had their hand up, but actually they're no longer in the meeting. So, actually, just kidding. Jennifer, I saw your hand up. Did you want to give public comment?
Yeah, I can make a public comment. I was listening. Wait, do I start now?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, I'm Jennifer Kriz, and I live on 4th and Fulton. And I understand the concerns that have been expressed about the unsignalized intersections. I live at 4th and Fulton, where there's allegedly going to be a light placed. And I actually have a concern about the safety of a light being placed. And I would much rather have a pedestrian crossing, because right now the intersection of 4th and Fulton is a quiet intersection. There's very little pedestrian traffic across Fulton, and there's very little car traffic crossing over from 4th onto Fulton, either going east or west. And I'm concerned that the presence of a light will greatly influence the use of 4th Avenue as a vector between Geary and Fulton, and therefore put my family, which lives at 4th and Fulton, at greater risk when we're crossing either over towards the west on 4th Avenue or across to the park. Right now, there's a wonderful détente. We've lived here for 25 years. And when we cross the street, cars stop. We're very comfortable. We've raised 3 children at 4th and Fulton. They've all learned how to cross Fulton Street without any issue, in strollers, on bicycles, on scooters, or on foot. There is a light. The lights are timed well so that we can cross without any cars rushing through our intersection. And I would much rather have a pedestrian crossing where there's a flashing light than a traffic light that allows Waymos and Ubers to use 4th Avenue as a primary vector to the other side of the city. Thanks.
Thank you, caller. There is no more public comment.
Great, thank you so much. If there are no other questions or comments from members, can I get a motion and a second on this item? Moved by member Margarita, seconded by member Kim. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to approve item 10, member Boers absent, Vice Chair Daniels absent, member Ford.
Approved.
I'm sorry, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Ford, aye. Member Kim?
Kim, I.
Kim, aye. Member Levine absent, Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, I. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, I. Member Ing.
Ing I.
Ing, I. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, I. There are 7 ayes. The motion is approved.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for the presentation. That puts us on item 11, which is the SFMTA Mid Valencia Bikeway Project Update, and this is an information item. I'm glad to see this item on the CAC agenda, as it's been of high interest for the CAC for a while. Thank you to Paul Stanis, project manager, who is with us remotely to present this item.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Stanis. I'm the project manager for the Valencia Bikeway project. We have been very hard at work this year. We have made a lot of progress in a lot of areas, and I'm happy to share with you tonight what we've been working on this year. So real quickly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to today, the project background. I want to talk a little bit about the Center Running Bikeway and what we've learned from it, and then where we're heading with our side running bikeway option. We've done a ton of outreach and a ton of design this summer, so I'm excited to share all the work that we've been doing. And then finally, I just want to talk about the next steps for the project. So very quickly, or maybe not quickly, I want to talk about how we got to where we are today. So when we're thinking about Valencia, we're thinking about 3 things. We want to improve the safety for everybody who is using the street. We want to preserve the economic vitality of all the great businesses and shops that make Valencia the great place that it is. And then we also want to make sure that the movement of goods and people is done in a way that's predictable and feels safe. So before the Center Running Bikeway was installed on Valencia, it could feel very chaotic. If you were riding a bike, the bike lane was adjacent to parked vehicles and next to a lane of moving vehicles. So you are in between cars on either side. If you were riding a bike, it could be very challenging. People were parking in the bike lane, double parking, opening doors. Overall, it just made for a very uncomfortable experience. We know that before the Center Running Bikeway, about 2/3 of all loading activity was happening either in the bikeway or in the vehicle travel lane. And that actually 40% of all loading was actually happening in the bike lane. So riding a bike on Valencia wasn't great, but a lot of people did it because it was the best option riding through the Mission. You have a direct connection from Cesar Chavez and area south, right through Valencia, right into Market Street, and connections to the Wiggle and the Panhandle. So it's a very important street on our bike network. And we've seen about 3,500 cyclists per day ride down Valencia. So when we were originally thinking about trying to construct some sort of upgraded bikeway on Valencia, it was right before COVID, and we thought we were going to do a curbside bike lane. COVID happened, we had to put the project on hold, and when we came back, we realized that the characteristics of the street had really changed. A few years ago, there were about 70 parklets up and down this 8-block stretch between 15th and 23rd. And doing a side running bikeway would have been really challenging. You would have had to slalom the bikeway from the curb around the parklets and back to the curb. That would have been very challenging for cyclists. And it also would have removed a lot of parking loading. So when we picked up the project a couple of years ago, we realized that we needed to think a little bit differently on Valencia, the way things had changed. And we settled on a Center Running Bikeway because it preserved the outdoor dining spaces that were really important for businesses. Maintained a lot of the parking and loading up and down the corridor, but also provided a protected bikeway for people who are riding bikes. So we did a center running bikeway, and we heard a lot about it. We heard initially very mixed reviews. So some people said, yes, it actually provides a better facility for me to ride my bike. You can see the roadway a little bit better. It also exposed people to a very startling scenario where emergency vehicles or people riding ATVs or dirt bikes would use that center running bikeway to travel very quickly. We know and we heard extensively that businesses were still are trying to recover from COVID. And there was an impression that the bikeway was driving people away. And some of the things that we heard was that it was a confusing layout. Motorists did not exactly understand the turn restrictions, where to park, how to navigate around Valencia. And there was a lot of confusion of where they could actually park as well. And even though we tried to maintain as many parking and loading spaces as possible, we still did reduce some of them. So there are actually fewer spaces along the corridor. One thing that we did notice was that people were not parking in the bikeway as much. As I'll show a little bit later from some of our evaluation, the frequency and number of double parking instances was significantly reduced. And then finally, we heard a lot from folks to either change the street to back how it was pre-COVID with the Class 2 bikeways, or just remove the bikeway off of Valencia altogether. And we are not going to do that. We are not entertaining that idea at all. So we heard a lot. We have spoken with over 100 businesses up and down the corridor, which is more than half of the businesses on the 8-block stretch. So we did a lot. We tried to make parking and loading much simpler. So when we implemented the center running bikeway, we had parking kiosks where you would get out of your car and pay at a single pay station. So one pay station may be the place where you park or where you pay for parking for 8 or 9 vehicles, and that was confusing for some people. So we put all of the single space meters back and included decals on the back of them that made it very clear what type of vehicle could park at what time. We wanted to reinforce that there were no left turns and U-turns along the corridor, so we put up additional signage. And we also wanted to advertise that there is plenty of parking on Valencia. There happen to be 2 SFMTA garages off of Valencia that most times of the day have parking available, and in some cases are actually cheaper than street parking. And then finally, we tinkered with some of the signals at 15th and 23rd, and those are the 2 intersections where the center running bikeway goes to the side of the street. So we just kind of tightened up some of the slack on those 2 signal timing patterns because we wanted to make sure that congestion was not becoming too much of an issue at those locations. So we have been evaluating this project a lot because it is a new thing for San Francisco, and we wanted to see how people were reacting to it. We actually measured a lot of different metrics at the 1-month, 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month marks. So we have a whole suite of information. At the 3 and 6-month marks, we noticed that the average daily vehicle volume was down by about a quarter. The average daily bicycle volume was about the same. Vehicle left turns and U-turns, they're about 1% of all vehicle turning movements, which is lower than what it was before, but 1% is still not 0. And then we saw that double parking was still occurring, but instead of that 67%, it was down to 13 or 14%. And of that 13 or 14%, only 1/10 of 1% was actually happening in the bikeway. So that is one way to measure the effectiveness of a project, but I think the statistic that people may be most interested is the collision rate. So there was a lot of interest in this a few months after the project was completed. We did see an initial spike in collisions on the corridor. We saw a jump from 2.4 collisions per month up to 3.7. As time has gone on, that number has, or that rate has gone down each time we're measuring metrics for the corridor. And I can tell you that we just got our 12-month crash data back, and the 12-month crash data is very close to the pre-pilot data as well. So that 2.4 crash rate is very similar to what we're seeing at the 12-month mark. This is really common on some of the projects where we do introduce a new bike facility or an upgraded bike facility. In fact, this segment of Valencia from 15th to Market Street that has a side running curbside bikeway has a very similar crash pattern. Went up a little bit in the first few months and then slowly went down as time went on. We've seen some interesting things happen with our bike and scooter involved crash rates and our pedestrian involved crash rates. So bike and scooter crash rates are basically the same pre-pilot. We did a deeper dive into this, and we've seen that actually scooter related crashes have gone up and bike related crash rates have actually been about the same and a slight decrease from pre-pilot conditions. So encouraging things at the 12-month mark, which is why we wanted to take our time evaluating the project, but because this was a new and unique project in San Francisco, there was a lot of interest in evaluating it and our crash rates right out of the gate, which is not the time to evaluate and form an opinion about a project because they need time to adjust and develop new travel patterns around the new roadway configuration. One other thing that we did is we actually had a survey out. So we did an intercept survey along the corridor, asked people how do they get to Valencia, ask people their personal characteristics, their gender, their age, their income, things like that. We learned some interesting things. So in general, people feel much safer due to these street changes. You're separated from moving vehicles. You don't have that risk of double parking or people blocking the bike lanes. People who drove Valencia, they indicated that it took them about 5 minutes to find parking, and they parked an average about two blocks away from the street itself. And then we also learned that a little more than half live or work near Valencia Street, and about a quarter of folks go there to shop and have fun. Okay, so we evaluated a lot. There was a strong movement to change the center running bikeway and look into a side running option. So at the beginning of the year, SFMTA board directed the project team to start looking into a side running bikeway option. And that's what we've been doing all year. And in June, they decided to endorse a side running bikeway design. So that was the authority to us to start taking the design from a concept to a final design. And that's what we've been doing for the past 4 months. When we're looking at the side running bikeway design, there are some things that we've been flagging for folks all year. The main thing is there are roadway constraints on Valencia, especially in the 15th to 19th Street section. That section, if you remember, if you've been around for a little while, those sidewalks were widened about 15 years ago. That means that there's 10 fewer feet on the actual street to put in bike lanes, to put in a buffer, to put in parking, to put in driving lanes, all of that stuff. Once you get south of 19th Street, you have the 10 more feet. So you can have wider bike lanes, you can have a wider buffer. Life is a little more comfortable when you get farther south. We have been very busy with outreach. Like I mentioned earlier, we've met with over 100 businesses up and down the corridor. In the spring, we held some mini open houses. So that was taking groups of folks in these 2-block sections and just show them a conceptual design, saying this is what the street looks like now. This is what your block could look like under a side running option. We got a lot of input on that. We were very clear that a side running option means a few things. It means that you would lose more parking and loading. It means that you could have a side running bikeway. It means that we have to consider a lot of how the street functions. We've been busy showing up at merchants meetings. We've demonstrated a few products that might be new to Valencia. We've gone to Sunday Streets, we've gone to Bike to Wherever Day. And then about a month ago, we held 2 open houses where we showed the final designs to the community. We invited residents, merchants, advocates, anyone who had an interest on Valencia to see the final designs and share their opinions. We were there to answer questions. So we wanted to make sure that we were getting the word out on the final option and what your frontage may look like if you live or work or visit Valencia. One of the things that we heard a lot of questions about were this idea of a floating parklet. We introduced this idea to parklet owners up and down Valencia in the spring and said to them, you know, we may have a few options for parklets if we pursue a side running bikeway design. And these, like everything else, have trade-offs. Previously, there were 70 parklets up and down Valencia. Now there are about 26. So we talked to all of those 26 owners, said, if you have a curbside curbside parklet and you want to keep it there, that's fine. It's totally okay. But it would mean that we would remove parking on either side because we would have to transition the bikeway from the sidewalk around the backside of the parklet and then back to the sidewalk. If you're interested in a floating parklet, we could squeeze in parking and loading on either side of your floating parklet. So we offer those options to folks. We also did our own homework. So we talked to Oakland and New York City. They've had floating parklets for a number of years. We talked to them about what works and what doesn't, and then took the best ideas from those 2 cities and incorporated them into our preferred option in San Francisco. So when it all came down to it, of those 26, 21 wanted to remain curbside. 2 wanted to remove their parklet altogether, just tear it down. I don't use it. It's becoming a maintenance issue. And then 3 were interested in moving to a floating parklet position. So we talked them through the process. We let them know what they're going to have to do. And then we've been working very closely with them, just showing them examples from other cities. So the example from Oakland, examples from New York, the example on the lower right here, that's an example in Oregon. That's probably the closest example that we're going to have on Valencia with a few tweaks. So yeah, in the end, 3 people were interested in floating parklet option. Okay, so like I mentioned before, the design for a side running curbside bikeway is very complex. There are many trade-offs. We've been working very closely with businesses, advocates, merchant groups, community groups, and emergency services. The parking and loading mix is very block and business specific. So once again, we've been very, very closely working with VCMA, Valencia Corridor Merchants Association, to understand their parking and loading needs as they see them, and revising our design based on their input. Every inch of the corridor has been considered. So where we can fit in vehicle parking, loading, we're doing that. There's a little leftover space. Maybe we can fit in a few scooter parking spaces or motorcycle parking. And we've heard that's very helpful because there's an increase in DoorDash, Uber Eats, and a lot of those delivery drivers use scooters. So we want to accommodate them as well. Something that we've heard from VCMA is it would really be nice to have landscaping along the corridor. So we've been working closely with them and landscape architects at Public Works to introduce the idea of planters and plants. So we're going through that process now. We've also added a lot of blue zones up and down the corridor. So we're trying to get more in compliance with our ADA and ProWAG guidelines. And we are adding more blue zones up and down the corridor and on side streets as well. And then the final design, it really does incorporate a lot. It incorporates a lot of input from fire and police, pedestrians and cyclists, and accessibility, and all the feedback that we've gotten from all of those interested parties. So this is 2 sample blocks. The upper one is the narrower section, so that's where everything is a little squeezed and a little more snug. That's where the bike lane is a little tighter and the buffer is a little tighter. This shows you an example of what a curbside parklet would look like. So parklets are the little orange or brown rectangles. So on the right side, that's Joyride Pizza. They want to keep their parklet against the curb. You go down a little bit farther south. That's Manny's Cafe. Manny's really interested in having a floating parklet. The wider section, that's representative of those last southern 4 blocks. And generally it's the same. There's more width for the buffer and for the bike lane because we have those 10 extra feet. But here's another example of Boogaloo's in the lower right corner that they want to keep their parklet against the curb. And then Ritual Coffee is really interested in pushing their parklet into a floating position. So where are we and where are we headed? Our goal is to go to our board next month. We are eyeing November 19th. That's when we hope we can present the project, get input from our board, have public comment, and then hopefully get approval and then move toward construction. We think construction is probably going to last 2 to 3 months. But that really is weather dependent. And because it's the wet, cold, rainy season, we're flagging that for folks and just letting them know that construction could take a little bit longer than we anticipate. It really depends on what kind of winter we have. We're doing a lot to keep the community informed. So we've set up a few working groups where we've invited representatives from the Merchants Bike Coalition, residents, independent merchants to just talk about implementation. And because we heard a lot last time about frustration and confusion and people not knowing if it was completed or not, or where you could ride your bike, we're trying to avoid that this time. So we've held 2 of those meetings so far. It's mainly been a listening session and sharing information with folks and how we think implementation is going to go. And then now that we have the final design, we're going to work more closely with our shops to just understand how implementation could go. We're going to revise where we need once the project is complete. So if there's a change that we need to make with parking and loading, or a little tweak with the bikeway design, then that's what we're going to do. And then in the background, we have these long-term studies. So we're looking at long-term options for traffic and circulation, curbside management, and then also placemaking. So those are all continuing in the background and should be ready sometime next spring, hopefully. So that's all that I had for tonight. I'm sure there are questions. So I'm here to answer whatever you may want to ask.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega?
Hi, yeah, I'll try to keep this short since it's already really late. First I wanted to thank you for the presentation. I think it's really helpful. There's sort of one comment, one more of a question, but the first comment is that I was informed about the open houses, and I think that's wonderful, except for the fact that they were from 4 to 6 p.m., which meant that quite a few people that I know that wanted to go couldn't because they were either at work or they had to try to get there in time. And I think this is something I brought up to SFMT before. This isn't really for something you to comment on. I just really want to keep bringing it up to SFMTA and to the CTA that when you have public outreach events, you need to make sure that you can have people that live in the neighborhood that may be working not in the area be able to attend. My partner uses the Valencia bike lane every single day and really wanted to go, but he had to work and couldn't make it to the Valencia bike lane meetings to give his comments. I am now here relaying that to you. But I think it's really important that when you're saying you're getting all this feedback, that you're making sure you're covering the wide swath of the people that use that, and that includes commuters. So when I understand that you have email, but sometimes they don't always have all the information or the diagrams or being able to ask questions in person, I think is really important. And so I really want to encourage the SFMTA and the next phase of outreach to make it actually available to everyone. Because I have not found that to be true as a working person who has somewhat of a demanding job. My next question, and this is more of a comment, is it really seems like with the newest version of the plan, we are getting the worst outcome between having to have both floating and non-floating parklets. I feel like we're losing even more space that the merchants want for unloading, not unloading, for parking. I feel like you're adding more confusion, potentially more issues where people maybe try to double park again. Like, I feel like that was the one statistic that went down. I'm not saying the center lane is perfect. I think there are problems, but the feedback that I have been given from quite a few of my friends, family members, is that it's a lot better because at least now they don't have double parking. And I'm worried about putting it back on the curb, even with all the modifications. I'm worried that you're just gonna start introducing more problems again, and that it's not actually gonna solve the solution that the merchants want. And it's going to just make it more unsafe for the bicycles. So that's it. Thank you.
Any other member Marguerite? Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of what Laura Vega just commented. One of the last statements is you're gonna keep the community informed. It's almost like you're not including the community. And it's looked at as the next step. So I really want to emphasize what Member Ortega said, like which businesses are you including? What are the hours? Like really put effort into reaching into all of the members in the community. There's different churches and other businesses and families and other people who are coming into that area. I appreciate that you said that you're going to look at the ADA parking because even in the new map, it doesn't show that much. And so it's important not just for compliance, but just for ethics to make sure that it's accessible to people who have disabilities. So just really keeping that in mind and also just, you know, for safety for everyone. And my last question is, I thought it was going to be that you're still going to keep the middle bike lane plus adding 2 side bike lanes. Is it that you're saying you're gonna go back to the 2 side bike lanes and remove the middle bike lane? Thank you.
Yeah, so especially on that last point, we are removing the bike lane that goes down the middle of the street, and we're going to put it against the curb, which is different than how it was a few years ago. So we're going to implement a bikeway design that is already on Valencia. It's between 15th and Market. But the center running bikeway as it is today would be removed.
And like who, did you include the community in making that decision? I mean, it just doesn't make sense for safety for bike riders. And if you're not adding more parking and yeah, again, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken with over 100 businesses up and down the corridor. We've worked very closely with the 2 main merchant associations, and every time we meet with them, we let them know that the side running bikeway design would remove more parking and loading. And we have heard that those associations are okay with that. There's a level of just wanting to remove what's there right now because it doesn't work in their minds for the people who visit those businesses. So there's confusion around how to park, if you can pass a vehicle or not, if you can go into the center running bikeway. And then there's a quality of life issue. So because there's this wide open middle of the road, it's very inviting for people to drive down very fast. Sometimes those are dirt bikes, sometimes those are ATVs. And that is something that we've heard up and down the corridor is very disruptive for people. So we have worked very, very closely with everybody on the corridor. If they're not there, we've tried to reach them a second time. We've gone back and spoken with some merchants 5 or 6 times. There are things that we've done as well. Like before we had our open houses, we sent invites to merchants on each 2-block segment and walked with them, showed them the final designs, said, here is where your input is reflected. If you wanted a white zone in front of your business, here's that white zone, just as you wanted. We were also very upfront with the parking and loading removal. So we've been flagging that for businesses. They still seem okay with that trade-off.
Does that mean that in the middle, as it was before, like for example, on Valencia Street, I can think of like right in front of where the funeral home is at on 24th, 25th, that area, that the cars are gonna be parking there in the middle again? Or what is that gonna be in the middle now?
So nothing's happening south of 23rd. The only section we're talking about is from 15th to 23rd. So under the proposed design, there would be no center median. You would just have a lane of travel in each direction. And that strip that was there previously would not return.
Do you have the dates already, I'm assuming, set for any new meetings for community to be included? And I'm assuming those are on your website, and similar to what Member Ortega just said, is it outside of the 4 to 6 p.m. hours so that it's accessible to other people who get out of work after 6?
So we won't have any more open houses, but we do send out monthly email updates to our email list. We will also continue to inform people as construction start dates get closer and clarified. But we are still making the rounds with people. So we're meeting with the merchant associations, we're meeting with the advocate groups. If someone emails us and wants to talk to us, we are available and we are having those conversations every week. So we've had a very long and robust outreach and dialogue with the community for the entire year. And that has really been reflected in the final design that we're hoping to approve.
Okay, promise, last comment. Just really quickly, but recently I went into San Mateo off of 3rd Street or 3rd Avenue. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have this area where it's blocked off for pedestrians only, and there's bikes that are able to be routed. And I just thought, I was like, what a great idea. There's no cars that are passing by here, so it's safe for pedestrians and bikes. And then they had certain hours where people with businesses can load and unload, and they had a specific hours and specific areas for parking for those trucks and cars for loading and unloading, and also for people with ADA needs, disability needs. And so, I mean, Valencia Street came up to my mind, like, why can't we do that there? So that's just a comment, like outside of the box thinking before you go into this construction. But yeah. Thank you for your reports.
Thanks.
Okay, so on number 4, it's Craig.
want to be quick because we're late, and I really appreciate that you guys made the time to come and present to CAC tonight. I just want to like add a 2 cents of, I actually really like the move to side running lanes. When I'm traveling to Valencia, it's normally for a destination on Valencia, and the center running lanes are very difficult for entrance and exits. As a cyclist, the floating parklets have come up a lot as in the bike community as like a conflict point between pedestrians and cyclists. A lot of your pictures included wider lanes passing those floating zones. And I went to public comment when they built the side running lane in front of the Friends School on Valencia, and there was a lot of concern about the floating load unload zone, and I would say that many of those concerns were unfounded. So I acknowledge that maybe we're unfounded. I guess I'm wondering how you've addressed the floating parklets and potential conflict there.
Yeah, so because we really haven't done a floating parklet in San Francisco, we had multiple conversations with Oakland and New York. Some of the way that they design their floating parklets, we would not do in San Francisco. Some of the highlights on what we're proposing is a raised level crossing between the sidewalk and the floating parklet that would hopefully prioritize pedestrians and force cyclists to slow down at that point. If you're riding a bike, you would have to go up the ramp, across the level crossing area, and then down a ramp. We're going to have signage. We will have some railing around that crossing point. And then one thing, just to make sure that pedestrians are crossing at one location rather than just having an open face parklet where pedestrians can cross at any location from the floating parklet. And then the last thing that we're doing is having a setback for the parklet. So if you are stepping out of the floating parklet, there's going to be about a 3-foot space where you could step out of the parklet, but you would not be in the bike lane. That buffer area would be for you as a pedestrian to make yourself visible, look down the bike lane, and then also hopefully the cyclist will see you as well. So in the examples in New York and in Oakland, that's not the case. If you step out of a floating parklet, you are in the bike lane. So we want to have that buffer space where people can step out but not be in the bike lane and make sure they can see what's going on in each direction. So yeah, those are some of the highlights on the design. We've had a lot of questions about it, and that is basically the main number one question. Like, what is that interaction between a cyclist and a pedestrian going to look like? And what are you, MTA, doing to make sure that it's as comfortable as possible?
Member Ng.
I'll make my comment really quick also since we're running late. But I just wanted to add to what others have already raised. And I wanted to touch on the community engagement aspect of it. You mentioned outreach to merchants several times when talking about community engagement in general. And like how you showed them final designs and contacted some of them several times. And I think it's great that you're building long-term relationships with some of the merchants. But I just wanted to flag, like, what about the everyday person and how do you meet them where they are? Like, if you are able to meet these merchants where they are, why not everyone else? And I also just wanted to note that merchants associations don't always speak for the entire community. Sometimes groups will simply just speak the loudest. And it is really to get the merchants on board. But this is just coming from someone who also works in community. For context, I work in Chinatown. And sometimes there are conflicting opinions. So I just think that's important to flag.
Yeah, for sure. And we've experienced that as well. Like, the leadership of the main merchant association is not always representing what the 100+ businesses that we've talked to. So we've had to be very careful on who we're listening to and what situation, just to make sure that we're getting a full picture of what the street should actually be designed for.
Thanks so much for coming and taking the time to present to us. I have a couple of just super quick questions. One, it looks like the bike lane is parking protected, except in the areas where it has to go around parklets, and what is the protection in those spots?
Yeah, so there are a few locations where parking is not present. And I think those, like you said, are the curbside parking locations, and also where we have parking removal for either access to fire hydrants or daylighting at intersections, driveways, cross streets. So we're still trying to figure that out. I think we've been very focused on just getting to this point and getting this to our board. But now that we have a final design that was finalized last Thursday or Thursday before, we are trying to figure those fine-grained details out at this point. So that's our plan for the rest of this month, and then most of November. We've tried to use certain safe hit posts in the past, and some are more successful than others. I think because we want to get this project done as soon as we can, we will probably use a version of safe hit post, but there are opportunities for bikeway buffer hardening that we're going to look into as well. So not relying on, fingers crossed, drivers' good behavior, but having a physical barrier in there as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope that you will consider harder separation. And then the other thing was Vice Chair Daniels, who's not here, had expressed some concerns that church that she's a member of in the project area, she wasn't aware that they had gotten outreach, so I just wanted to check whether faith institutions in general had received outreach.
In general, yes. I mean, we have gone to every single frontage on the corridor, but if there is a specific church or storefront or address that we should reach out to, if you could pass that along to me, that would be really appreciated.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Member Margarita?
Can we do that for specific merchants that are also having issues with it, so that I heard unfounded on the whole loading and unloading for specific businesses that don't have access to loading and unloading, which is impeding them from just kind of doing their normal day-to-day businesses? Can we forward those names of those businesses to you? Because we're all hearing it together, right? We want the safety for everyone. And these particular merchants keep on getting tickets from SFMTA because, I mean, they're restaurants and they have to unload big blocks of things. So parking 2 to 3 blocks away, like you were mentioning earlier, doesn't work when you're carrying big blocks of things for your business. So again, similar to what, sorry, your last name, Ing, what member Ing was saying, just to really listen to everyone that's getting affected by this, because I would hate to see these changes, money being put into it, and then pedestrians or bike getting hurt. Like, that's what we don't want. Thank you.
Yeah, if there are additional people that should talk to us and we haven't yet, I just put my email into the chat, and hopefully it's attached to some of the material that I sent to you all. Yes, please forward it to me.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, thank you, Edward Mason. If I were to go to the finance department and say, what's the account number that your labor and the materials are being charged to for the Valencia Street project, how much money has been in that account been expended that we've spent with this program? So I'd like to know how much has been spent both in labor and materials. We say 3,500 people use it. What does that number really represent? Is that going downtown and then coming back being counted to 3,500, or is it only really 1,750 individual people. Regarding loading, have we considered loading by making a reservation on the internet so you avoid congestion? And you can say, okay, I have that space there from 10 to 10:30, and anyone can use that and utilize the internet for that. And what really baffles me is that we talk about doing DuBose and then having an access to Folsom Street. Well, my recommendation is make that 26th Street to Folsom. And just, why is this so sacrosanct that we have to have bicycles on Valencia Street, you know? From my perspective, the 26 bus don't run there no more, and nobody knows what I'm saying, but the 26 bus used to run there. And, you know, for some reason, it's evolved now to where, oh, I have to have it. Well, go use Folsom Street, and then let's go save some money, because this is just becoming a real drain on our resources. And we're not able to come to a conclusion. So I submit that and conclude my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment.
Great. And thank you so much for the presentation. This was an information item, so we can move on to item 12, which is introduction of new business, which is also an information item. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Milford Rosales?
Hello, so during last month's meeting, when discussing the temporary storage of LRV vehicles, or not LRV, sorry, of trolley bus vehicles during the Troy Yard construction project, it was mentioned that, or I remember being mentioned and couldn't find in the minutes that that the Presidio bus yard will become a battery-only bus yard down the road going forward. And I have not seen any documentation on that in other MTA comments and documents on planning. Would it be possible to maybe have someone from MTA come talk about their plans for the broader trolley bus fleet going forward sometime down the line? I know it's a huge part of what makes Muni's bus fleet so much greener than many other fleets, and with a lot of the problems that AC Transit has had switching to battery buses, it seems backwards to me to make the battery buses that we're acquiring replace the trolley buses instead of diesel ones. That's all.
Any other new business from members? Member Margarita?
Yeah, I understand that SFMTA is going to present something to the board on November 19th with regards to the topic that we just discussed, and I would want a follow-up conversation with SFMTA with all of the suggestions that were brought to the table to be really thought through, including what the community member, Mr. Mason, just suggested. Maybe not like an hour permit on the online, because then you're gonna have a truck, having a vision of a truck driving, because they have to make it between 10:30 and 11. So maybe not a timed one, but like a day, like, you know, they reserve Wednesday. They do this in Mexico City. The Board of Supervisors actually took a trip to Mexico City a few years ago. I don't know if you all remember that, but you know, certain cars are able to park there who bought the permit that is green on Tuesdays, and then the next car bought it when it's blue on Wednesdays. I mean, we have to really think outside of the box for safety, and also because San Francisco's made up of beautiful small businesses, and these businesses, it's not false, they have closed, they're not there anymore after 20, 30 years. So that's a true statement. And so we really have to find a way to live all together here. Bikes, pedestrians, drivers, small businesses, so that we continue to support mom and pop shops that are currently struggling, and it's not just big multi-million, billion-dollar businesses. Yeah, and not everybody can do transit because they have 2 to 3 jobs, because San Francisco's so expensive and they're raising children. So they do need a car to go between school and their 2 to 3 jobs and picking and dropping off kids. So again, we need to think about everyone in the community when SFMTA is imposing these things of, parking and sidewalks and all of this other stuff. So just a follow-up conversation together so that we can work on this together, and also we will be forwarding names of businesses and churches, etc., so that you can have these conversations with them. So thank you.
Member Kim?
Yeah, I'm adding member Margarita's comment. Maybe that's related to curbside management. Right now, District 1 multimodal study has included those one curbside, but I'm small business owner. I have similar issue. Once last year they removed angled parking to parallel. We have fewer parking space, so I have to go shopping really early. After 10 a.m., there's no parking. So, but I was thinking there's some loading zone, but like the yellow one, somebody takes some, the delivery truck, or we have the red one, but that's for the 6-wheel vehicle only. So I have a minivan, I cannot use it. Sometimes I have to use it. But there's a possibility I can get ticket. So it's really issues. So if I know, I go a couple of times a week, if I can book some spot, in the booking system, as Mason mentioned, and then much easier. So maybe we can talking about specifically curbside management. MTA has it, but they feel like they need some update or upgrade or new idea. Maybe we can talking about and suggest some ideas. I think it's good. So curbside management from MTA. Thank you.
Is there any public comment on new business? Great, then that puts us on item 13, which is public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there any public comment?
It's too late.
Is there any remote public comment?
That's a first.
There's no remote public comment.
Great.
You got your emails, Ms.
That
Don't
puts
worry.
us on item 14, which is adjournment. Meeting is now adjourned.